Okay, you guys. Hi, it's Mrs. DeLong. Today we're gonna make some Christmas cards because I love making things at Christmas time, and I think this will be really fun. Teach you some watercolor basics, okay, so that you can use these techniques for the rest of the year if you want to, okay? These are the 3 designs we're gonna make, but you're gonna make 4 cards, so your 4th one you can make whatever you want. So things you need at your desk today are 1 piece of watercolor paper, 9 by 12, that we will get out to you. And then you're gonna need 2 paint brushes, a round one. It doesn't need to be this big, but whatever one came in your kit should be round. And then like a flat one like this. And then you're gonna have your watercolor tray. I don't have the exact same watercolors as you, but here's mine. Trying to make sure you can see this in the frame. And then we're gonna have a little bit of white. This is like a gouache, but we're gonna use it probably an acrylic for you today, okay? So we don't have white with watercolors really. Okay, first things first, you're gonna separate your paper into 4 pieces. So what I want you to do is, look, I already got paint on this. That's okay. That happens sometimes. I'm just gonna go with it. So we're gonna fold it in half one way and then in half the other way as well. Okay. My son is having a snack right behind me, so you may hear him. Okay, and this paper is kind of hard to fold, so make sure that you check that the corners are lining up, okay? Now, if you don't like a torn edge look, you're welcome to cut it at this point. We can pass out some scissors, but what I like to do is take your paintbrush and a little bit of water. Oh, I forgot to mention you need water. And I just paint the edges here like this, where I folded. Fold it again. Pinch, 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 pinch. And flip it over and do the same thing, okay? Get some water on it. Okay, fold it again. Okay, now, if you've folded it enough times and it's wet enough, you should be able to just pull it apart like this. And this gives you kind of a, do you guys remember when we were making paper? This rough edge was called a deckled edge. Kind of gives you a deckled edge. Okay, and then it makes 4 even pieces of paper, okay? So we're gonna start on a wreath first. So just grab 1 piece. You guys have already done a wreath, so this shouldn't be too hard for you. Oh, buddy. You dropping this a lot? You dropped your cracker. Here's some yogurt Maltese. Okay, so we're gonna start with a light green. So the way that you make things lighter with watercolor is by just not having as much color and more water. So start with more water. See, I have some blue, dried blue here that's re-wetting, so that's fine. I like kind of a blue-green anyway. So just gonna add some more green, this light green. You should have, I think you guys have like 3 or 4 colors of green, so pick whichever one you want. A light one, okay? And we're just gonna go around in a circle and make some really light colored leaves like this, okay? You're just gonna press down with your paintbrush. Mine has kind of a weird tip curve on it. Yours shouldn't have that, but it's because I let my daughter use this paintbrush. Okay, just really light, leave yourself some space. The magic with watercolor is leaving white space. That's kind of knowing when to go lightly and hold back and add more water, okay? So you're gonna make a wreath. It's not a perfect circle, that's fine. Wreaths aren't perfect anyway. Okay? Now we're just gonna set that aside. Okay? And let that dry for a minute. All right, next one. So we're gonna get this next one started. So what I want you to do is do the same thing really light. I want you to pick a blue. Mine's kind of a blue-green again. I like to mix on the lid of my watercolor because it's just easy. So make sure there's lots and lots and lots of water here. Tons of water and just a tiny bit of pigment, just so we can see And I'm pulling in a little bit of purple here. So you can do whatever, a blue, green, purple, something cool toned, okay? But really, really light, lots of water. It should just be barely, do you see that color? It's just barely color. And I want you to make a little mountain range. Remember when we talked about mountains, make sure that this is uneven, okay? Don't make perfect points. Make it kind of squiggly. Let your hand be rough, okay? Just make some little mountains, all right? It should be really light. If you don't like how light that is, you can add a tiny bit of color at the bottom ridge here, and it'll start to bleed upward. This is called a wet on wet technique, okay? Wet on wet means you've got your paper wet here, and then you're adding more pigment to it. Wet on dry is like this. My paintbrush is wet, but the paper is dry. Okay, this is wet on wet. So we're gonna let that dry there for a second, and then we're gonna make a slightly darker color. I'm gonna kind of go with a purple. I'm gonna mix a little bit of a purple. You can mix a little bit of brown in if you wanna desaturate it. Desaturating a color means making it more brown, not as vibrant, okay? So I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna lay it over and make another mountain here, another mountain range. And see, we're losing it a little bit because this is so wet, so that's okay. So what we'll do is kind of do this one, and then we're gonna leave this one too, okay? We're gonna set this aside to let it dry. Let's come back to our wreath, and it should be medium dry. We're gonna get a slightly darker color. So with watercolor, you really wanna work light to dark, okay? That's how watercolor works. Acrylic is the opposite. You add your highlights at the end because it's so plasticky. You guys probably remember that because we were just working with acrylics, how you wanna add those highlights at the end. So we're gonna see how dark this is. Okay, that's kind of nice. That's not too dark. It's gonna bleed a little bit into these other ones because they're not totally dry. And that's okay. Watercolor should just be fun. Don't stress about it. Just kind of see what the paint does. I know for some of you more type A people, this might be kind of difficult because you want things to have sharp edges and maybe look perfect, but the messier watercolor is, sometimes the better it is. I'm just gonna leave that there, okay? Perfect. Okay, now we need to let this one dry because the next layer is gonna be, needs to be harder. But see how this is kind of bleeding in to these other colors? I really like that effect for a wreath. It gives it kind of a double tone there. Okay, let's pull one of your third ones out, your third one, and I'm gonna show you what a wash does, okay? So a wash is when you do, this is wet on wet technique, is when you make your entire paper wet. So I want you to wet your whole paper. Wet it down, wet it down, wet it down, wet it down. Wet the whole paper down. Okay, this is wet on wet. This is called a wash. So we're gonna take a color, it can be any color. Start light though. Make sure that it's has a good amount of water in it. And you're just gonna touch it to the bottom here, okay? And you're gonna lift your paper up a little bit and add some more pigment and kind of watch it run. You can add more pigment. Okay, you're gonna watch it, see what happens. Kind of experimenting, huh? I want this to be like a really pretty ombre. Just gonna keep adding your color. Oh, that's my son. Okay. You can now, let's add something else. Let's add another color in here. Huxley. Okay. Okay, yeah. So now we're gonna touch this with water too. And just let it bleed down your paper. Okay. And I kind of mix in the middle, see what happens. If you want to add a touch of green, a blue green, it can kind of look like the Northern Lights. But you don't have to. You can do whatever you want here. Just let it bleed down, okay? Isn't that nice? Ooh, I love that. Oops, I made a fingerprint there. And that might happen too. If you want to fix that, when you're holding it, you just add some water and just let the color bleed a little bit. Okay, it's such a nice wash. We're gonna let that sit for a second. So if you're doing like a landscape and you wanted like a kind of a washy background, this is how you would do that. And we're gonna sprinkle a little bit of salt on this. Don't do it everywhere because you wanna add some different texture. But you're just gonna sprinkle a little bit and we're gonna see what happens, okay? Now go ahead and take your water brush and do a couple more dabs of water. Bless you, Huxley. So we're gonna just get a couple dabs of water just like this, okay? There we go. Perfect. You can do a little more sprinkle if you want. Okay, so let's set this aside. There's your little washy background. Okay. Let's go back to our mountain range here. So this is semi-wet now. So you see it's kind of bled into itself and that's fine. This is the one we're making for that. So we did our back mountain. Now we're gonna do kind of a medium tone. So go ahead and get a purple blue. You want it to be definitely more pigmented than the last time. But not super dark. Okay, that looks pretty good. We're gonna make a different mountain range here. So different shape all together. Bring it down past that last mountain that you made. Okay, kind of do this at an angle because we're building these mountains. This might blur out a little bit, but that's okay. Okay, we're gonna do one more darker now. So with landscape, the more vibrant a color, the more in the foreground it is. It means in the front. And the more faded it is, the further back in the background. You guys have seen mountain ranges. When you look at them, they get lighter as they go backwards. Okay, so I'm gonna make kind of a blue purple. Oh, that's too blue. I don't like that. So I'm just gonna add some more purple, some more red, okay, to make like a more purple tone. Okay, purpley. And then I'm gonna turn this to green. So let's take some medium green. Let's mix our greens together. You can add a little bit of blue, add some more water. Okay, we're gonna turn this into greenery here. So just start light, mix in some blues, mix in some greens, just feel it. Okay. All right, perfect. Mountain gradient now with green kind of in the foreground. Okay, let's let that dry and go back to our wreath. So this is a great way to work when you're doing watercolor, is to kind of go back and forth. So you can check on this guy and see if this one's like really thin right now, so I'm just gonna add a few dots of color on this just to give it some contrast. So you can do that and kind of see what wet on wet does when you do that. And add maybe a little bit more salt. So you can just play around with that as it dries. Okay. So let's go back to our wreath. This should be medium dry now. I want you to take your brush and try to make it, dry it off a little bit. Dry it off and try to make a nice point, okay? We're gonna do like a blue-green, pick a blue-green and make it pretty intense here. Medium maybe, like a medium mix to water ratio. Okay, and that's maybe a little too blue. I'm gonna darken it up. Yeah, so let's do kind of a dark blue. So if that's not, or dark green, sorry. If that's not dark enough, add some brown or some black if you wish to make it a dark green. Let's make like a forest green here, okay? We're gonna do some pine needles. Okay, so that's with green and a little bit of brown is what I did. You can also add red. So to desaturate a color, all you have to do to make it more brown, is what I mean by desaturate, is take some green, which I'll show you. So this is bright green. You see how bright that is? It's like real Christmas green. You add the opposite color from the color wheel. So on the color wheel, red is opposite of green. So we're gonna add a little bit of red. And now look at that. We have the same dark olivey green as we did over here by adding brown. So that's a little color theory tip for you. We haven't done the color wheel yet, so this is kind of jumping ahead, but I want you to have that knowledge. Okay, so that should be enough. We're gonna just carefully draw some sticks like this with the tip of your paintbrush. Kind of make them a little bit go out and around. okay, like this, in one direction. Okay, and that's not quite dark enough. So I'm gonna, now after I did those, I'm gonna add a little bit more brown or a little bit more blue and make, or more green, and make kind of a darker color here. Okay, now I'm gonna make some pine needles. So we're just gonna do this with our brush. Just make little pine needle motions. Make it smaller as they get to the tip. Okay, so longer at the edge and then at the beginning, and then kind of shorter at the edge here. And you're gonna use your this stroke in the middle as your guide. Okay. This is gonna look really Christmassy. So, and you can kind of change your color too. It's okay if you kind of run out, because nature has a lot of different colors in it. So just kind of mix something else that works for you. Oh, this one came off a little farther, that branch. That's okay. Wreaths are kind of messy, which works really good for watercolor. And see, that leaf was still wet, so it's bleeding into that leaf. And that's great. That's just gonna add some different texture. Don't worry about that at all. So do you see how we're building from light to dark? We're building from light to dark. And that is how you do watercolor scenes. Hopefully these couple of tips will serve you well. So I'm varying my strokes too. See, they were really close together and kind of fat there, and these ones are kind of thinner, spindly. If you can believe it, we're almost done with this guy. I know this is a little bit of a different wreath than you did last time. I wanted to give you some variety. And that got kind of light there, so maybe I'll go back in and add some more detail to that one in a bit. Okay. You can fill in any, like, you know, spots that you think look funny or kind of too bare with just a few strokes here. Oh, look how pretty that is. Isn't that nice? Okay. So I'm going to teach you a little trick here. Get the end of your paintbrush wet and dip it into your brown. Okay. You can use a stick to do this too, but I didn't gather sticks for us. So what we're going to do is use this to do some little wooden branches. So you're just gonna use the edge to just kind of squiggle your squiggle the end of your pencil around, just in a few spots. Okay, don't do it everywhere. This is gonna add some little branches, and you can experiment with kind of where your branches go and how that looks. Just want little twiggies. You guys can experiment with using twigs too, actual twigs at home. It works really good. It's kind of fun. Yeah, I just like that. It adds a little bit of different texture for you. You can rip that off. Okay. The last thing is to add some berries if you want, or you can do a little bit more greenery. If you wanted one more level of like dark, you can do, so let's just mix like really highly pigmented. That means not a lot of water, lots of the paint pigment to make it really dark, and you can come in and add some details and just add a few of these that kind of pop even more. But you don't have to do that. That's just if you want to. Okay. And then we can add some berries a little bit more once it dries. Now you've got tons of different greens in here, which is really fun. Okay. Some little hairs. All right, great. Kind of hide that one. Okay, perfect. There's our wreath. He's looking pretty. Okay, let's come back to our tree here. Okay, so this should be looking pretty nice, and it should be fairly dry now. So what we're gonna do now is grab your brush that looks like this, the flat brush, okay? You're gonna get your water, and you're gonna get that a darker color. So some brown and some greens, maybe a little red, a teensy bit of red. You're gonna make this really nice and dark color, okay? And we're gonna make some trees by tapping like this. Okay, we're gonna make some trees here, some dark trees. And you're gonna kind of tap, leave some space, okay? Leave some green space around it, okay? And let's just add that one there, and then let's add some lighter trees in the back, some smaller trees, okay, just to give this some texture. So remember in watercolor, we build back to forward, so actually if you wanted to leave that till the last week, we could have done that, but that's okay, we'll work around it. And then we'll just add in some of this texture. So do some different colors, add a little blue in maybe, do some different tree textures. Oops, that's too dark. So if it's too dark, you have two options. You can just dab it with your towel and add some texture too. Or you can add more water and kind of distill it here. We just want to add some texture to this background because we want it to look like there's more trees in the background than there actually are. We're just kind of making it up as we go along. Okay, so you can kind of dab this sideways like this too. Give it some different, see how this is kind of bleeding up now? I really like that. That's going to give us some background texture. If you want to, you can sprinkle a little bit of salt now on these guys. That'll kind of give it some more fun texture. Okay. Now let's come back to our dark trees and let's keep doing those. So let's do our front layer, okay? So that's like these guys here. See, you know, every time I do this, it turns out slightly different and depends on if I let things dry or if I don't. So it's okay if these kind of bleed a little bit. We just want to add these darker trees to the top. So I'm mostly an acrylic artist, which means I'm kind of used to working dark to light, more than watercolor actually. So a lot of watercolor artists would maybe leave this completely white behind here, and that would be your snow, is by leaving these gaps, and that's fine. But for this painting and this card, I actually really like to just do a little bit of white itself. Okay, so this tree is really clear and kind of our main tree. It's kind of our primo tree there. So you could let this dry and then do another layer of tree like this, but for time's sake, we're gonna just leave it the way it is, okay? And you're gonna get some of your white. Oh, my white is blending into blue. If your white blends to blue, do it again in a different spot here. Make sure your brush is all wet. So we're just gonna water this down, get some white. And it's turning a little blue again, but that's okay. So you're gonna go in and add some white to your tree. And this works even better when it's dry. So we can let these dry and then do it again. I'll add some different texture there and we'll come back. So let's do the sky now. Just pick a really light wash, maybe just a slightly different tint than this last mountain, and kind of let it go over this mountain. It's going to give a nice little ridge there. Yeah, and the sky doesn't have to be perfectly solid, just kind of brush it like that. Okay, great. If you want to give it a few little blue splatters, I like to do that. You can do this with the blue. Gives it some texture. Okay, let's set that aside. This guy should be looking pretty cool now. You can add some more color. You can kind of do some more drips on it. I think I'm gonna add some more blue-green down here. Just kind of add some more water and some drips. This is just like an abstract piece. I wanted to teach you wet on wet and just like let you practice and see what it's like. Make some different colors. Add some salt. And just kind of experiment with this guy, okay? And if he feels good, it's nice to add a little bit of contrast, like that darker blue there. Makes it kind of nice. And let him dry. Okay, we're almost done, guys. So what we would do, this one's dry now. So if we don't have time in class, oh, see, some water got on that and made it bleed. So what I want to show you is the final snow on the trees. So you're gonna get some white and you're just gonna tap it kind of on these like the tops of what these branches would be. To really make this kind of pop. I'm hoping that this paint isn't very good. I'm hoping that the paint we have will work a little better actually for you. Okay, I'm almost done, baby. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Okay, so you add some snow like that. That's just kind of how I like to add snow. And then you can do this where you get a little bit of water on your white, and you do what we just did with the blue and kind of sprinkle it carefully, not to get white stuff everywhere in the classroom. But get it wet with some water and sprinkle it and it'll look like snow. Okay. So the last thing we're gonna do is add a few berries, if you want to. So you can add some red. You want this to be pretty highly pigmented, so make sure you just kind of go straight for that color. Ooh, he's so pretty. Okay. I just did a few little groupings. I'll do a couple up there. Okay, that is all 3 of your cards. You can do whatever you want with your 4th one, or you can do it on your own time if you want it later. But here's our cards. Okay, fully abstract, just for fun. You keep sprinkling salt if you want, just kind of keep seeing what happens. Here's your little mountain scene, and here's the one that was still kind of wet when I put the white on it, which looks great, or you can go back and add more trees and more white too if you want. And here's our wreath. And you can make homemade Christmas cards for everyone in your life this year. And they're not a folding card, I guess I should have said that in the beginning, but you just write on the back of them. You know, they're just kind of like little framing cards if they want them. If they want to frame them or whatever. Thanks, guys.